This video is for everyone who aspires or wants to grow in the consulting industry, who wants to grow their career in consulting. So today we have someone who works at PwC Dubai as a project manager. He has been a TEDx speaker. We're going to understand from him how one should prepare themselves for consulting interviews, what kind of work or what sort of projects an entry level consultant works on, the biggest challenge you face as a consultant, and the tips to grow in this field. Also, keep in mind that these videos are recorded over Zoom, so the quality will not be the best, but I can guarantee you each of these videos will provide you ample amount of knowledge, as these advices are being shared by experienced professionals working in that particular field. So make sure you subscribe to the channel to watch more of a similar content. And without further ado, let's welcome Varun Sharma. So, Varun, thank you for being a part of this video. I really appreciate you taking out the time for this.
Thank you for having me. Really means a lot.
So, you work at PwC. The very first thing which I wanted to understand from your side is what's the difference between a management consulting and tech consulting?
Okay, I think that's a great question. So I currently am working with PwC Digital Services. It's been about 3 years with them. Uh, it's been brilliant, and a lot of people get confused between the difference of tech consulting and management consulting. Generally, tech consulting is to do with how technology can help improve a business. It is not just related to overall functionality. Whereas a management consulting covers the functionality of the entire organization. So, for example, if you're saying, uh, is the organization effectively working, would be more for management consulting role. Whereas in tech consulting, what we do is we advise on the latest technology platforms and implement that as well. Implementation is sometimes taken into consideration, sometimes not. It primarily depends on the project to project. But most of the projects that we look at, we do implementation as well, based on the recommendations we provide.
And in terms of the process for consulting role, so what are the key tips that you can provide to anyone who's preparing themselves for a consulting interview?
So when you're looking at it from a consulting point of view, I think the foremost important thing is wanting to solve real world problems. I think that is the key skill of wanting to be a consultant. You should really be passionate about uh, getting into something specific and figuring out how you can actually add value. This would mean that you start doing cases early on. Uh, I have always been interested in cases from back in university. I could just read a case study and try to figure out what's going on, and I always had an aptitude for that. So that's why consulting seemed like the right career for me. Um, Other tips I would have would network with the industry. I think that's across, so that would not really be specific to consulting, but um, in consulting it goes a long way. Uh, that is very critical. Another aspect would be to learn the fundamental differences of different type of consulting. So you started by asking me the difference between management consulting and tech consulting.
Mhm.
I think knowing that difference plays a very important role. So in PwC, we've got multiple divisions. Uh, Depending on what your actual interest is very important for you to know where you should be getting at. So that would be another thing. Um, One key aspect which people take very lightly is learning PowerPoint, Word, and Excel. I cannot emphasize enough on how important it is as a consultant. Uh, you're pretty much going to be working on it day and night. So the earlier you get the hang of it, the better it is. If you're working in tech consulting and you're looking at getting into a more technical role, then it would be good to know your code as well, especially in interviews. I was not questioned much on that because I was not looking at a completely technical role. But if you are looking at that, it is very important to know your code and and at the same time know the latest languages and the technologies. Uh, I think these would be
Mhm.
really crucial tips on starting off with consulting. One book I'd really recommend is Case in Point, and there is a Case Interview Secrets. I think these two books are really important for any case interview.
And in terms of your grades, how important are your graduation grades when you want to apply for a consulting role?
I would not say that they are not important. I think they are extremely important in terms of getting an interview, in terms of landing an interview. Uh, you have a higher chance of getting. shortlisted if your CGPA out of a 10 is uh, above an 8 compared to if it's above a 6. It's as simple as that. Um, at the same time, I would want to say that even though grades are important, your passion plays a primary role. You should be getting into a career and you should be getting into uh, your professional life for something that you're interested in. You might not be the top of your class, but if you can actually go to the interview and show your interest in it, show your capability of learning it and excelling at a particular domain, uh, anyone would want to work with you. It's as simple as that.
And once you are a consultant at an entry level, what kind of a work does an entry level consultant do?
For my first few months, I was not even on a project. I was just trying to get the hang of how things are going around, just learning from here and there from others, from seniors in the firm. Um, but then I was eventually put on a project, and on the project, I was helping with documentation, uh, with a little bit of testing, with taking minutes of the meeting, noting it down, compiling them, uh, stuff like that. And not to forget PowerPoints. Like I said, you're going to be doing a lot of that if you're getting into consulting. That was the kind of role I was doing. Few other few other tips that I would give in terms of entry level consultant is try to make less mistakes. Again, that would hold true for any line, but in consulting it plays a bigger role because you are working with another entity. So if I'm doing a project with XYZ, I represent PwC and XYZ in this process. So if my documentation, my
Mm.
font is not the same from my heading, uh, it it impacts both of them. um, I think it's really critical to be paying attention to that, having attention to the final details. I've worked with few managers, few directors who even notice pixels being off on a presentation. Having that level of detail is very important when you're looking at consulting. Uh, the better you're understanding it and better you're looking at in terms of details, the stronger you would be in your professional life. Another aspect would be figuring out what you want to become an expert in. Because when you start out with consulting, uh, you're going to be moving around to different projects. You do not really have much of a choice to it, but there would come a time where you start becoming an expert in certain domains. So, for example, I worked out of my 3 years. I worked, I think, two and a half of it with free zones. So, free zone business process enhancements is something I know it at the back of my hand. Uh, so, getting to an expertise in one thing would definitely help you more than anything else. Uh, and having stronger communication, because once you get into a project, you will not be communicating directly with the client unless your project manager thinks your communication is strong enough to be directly calling the client or emailing the client or setting up meetings or even running meetings. It is not going to be easy for the project manager to trust you to be at that level unless you build it yourself. So I think these are really critical.
Understood. And in terms of the biggest challenge, so what are the biggest challenge you face when you're a consultant?
uh, Keeping clients satisfied. You be working long hours uh, to satisfy your client with the end result. You need to make sure they're happy, and because you're not just pleasing your own particular firm, like I said earlier, you are going to be pleasing other people, other stakeholders who are part of the project. uh, Keeping them satisfied is critical. um, One thing that people take for granted in consulting is the work life balance. You cannot do that. I think it's very critical to be uh, trying to maintain that. uh, Work out as much as you can, stay healthy, eat good food. uh, with with consulting, you people tend to go easy on themselves, and that has a very daunting effect. uh, and I think the biggest challenge of being a consultant and biggest problem you face is asking the right kind of questions at any
Mhm.
stage, because information you're getting is directly from your customer, is directly from your client. um, for example, one of the projects, I was made to ask what solutions did they implement earlier, why did it not work, what they liked in that, what they didn't like in that, and what they would consider for the future solution. Um, what is a good solution for the client in the future? Uh, what do they see as a good product? What is the MVP for them for to launch their product? Um, How would they consider the problem solved? Is there a metric they're looking at? Just trying to understand it. So, in terms of digital adaptiveness, are they looking at 80% of their customers coming online in the next 6 months? Is that a goal they're trying to achieve? Getting these questions going would really help you in being a better consultant, because then you start knowing more about the client, and there would be a day on the project where you know quite a lot about it, and you're able to help with anything and everything.
So, if you have to share like few key learnings or few key skills which you have personally developed since the time you became a consultant, what would those be?
I think better negotiation skills, most
Mhm.
importantly. I took up a course as well on that. I think during the second year of my consulting, because clients would always want the most out of the project, and just knowing where to draw the line to a deliverable and delivering what is satisfactory is very important. You should not be losing quality when you're doing a deliverable, and that's where negotiation plays a key role. Communication is something I have really focused on, and I think uh, my time at PwC has really helped me with that. Uh, I'm comfortable communicating with people of different regions, of different nationalities, of different grades. Uh, I think PwC has really helped me with that. Having a better understanding in terms of design has been something which I've been focused on, because I work in digital. I work with a lot of graphic designers. Knowing what is a good practice in that and what would look great is something I've picked up over time. Having that finer detail, I was not that good when I started off. I'm still learning as of today, and getting the hang of the finer details is really critical, and that's where the design aspect plays a big role. Um, one big thing about consultants is that knowing how to limit your scope without leaving any assumptions. I think that's very critical.
And when you're an entry level consultant, how much of the client interaction do you actually have?
Not much once you're starting off, because your project manager has to be comfortable with the idea of you communicating with the clients. There would be a time he'll let you start sending out emails. There would be a time where he'll he'll ask you to start setting up meetings. You start attending meetings. You start seeing how the meetings are going, and then you start adding value to the meeting. And there'll be a time where you start leading the meetings. It happens gradually, but you will not be put on day one in front of a client and made to interact with them, because generally the clients that you work with on consulting projects are very senior people, all CXOs, um, and because you're representing an external firm, your company has to be sure that if you're sitting over there, you're representing them in the best spirit possible.
Understood. And if you have to provide some tips on how to grow in a consulting firm or how to grow in a consulting role, what would those tips be?
I think an important way to grow in consulting firm is taking up roles that are more challenging, taking up roles that are above your grade. Uh, for example, when I was a consultant, I was trying to take up roles of the next grade, so I could prove myself in that particular grade where I could be counted for as a promotion. Uh, Otherwise, it becomes difficult for people to really trust if you can take up the next grade, and it just works simpler for them uh, to help you grow in the firm. Do all your tasks perfectly. Do not leave any room for error. Uh, the documents that you're making, the PowerPoints you're making, make sure there's no error in it, there's no typos. Uh, plays a bigger role than you think it does. Work with multiple senior management people. I think that's important, not from a promotion perspective, but just from a learning perspective. Uh,
Mhm.
I've had a great time in PwC to work with a lot of senior people, and I have learned from every single one of them. Everyone has a different thought process. Everyone is doing different things. You pick out their best skills and you start implementing it yourself, and then you work out to be a hybrid, uh,
True.
which is trying to get to where they are at. So I think that's really critical.
And in terms of managing a project, when you started managing your first project, how was the overall experience and what were the key challenges that you actually faced starting managing a project?
Currently, I am a project manager at PwC in about 3 years, and this happened because I started taking on more challenging roles, and there came a time where my project manager was comfortable with me taking up the project by myself, where he would only be guiding me. Uh, as as simple as that sounds, it took a long time for me to get to that comfortable level, because then you're not just taking care of the project, you're taking care of the client interactions, of the stakeholders, of the development on your team, of any external entities, of all the risk, of all the financials. There's quite a lot more which comes on board once you start managing a project. Getting the hang of that was daunting at first, I would say, but I think I was on a really good team uh, who helped me, and I helped them to grow. And this was for a free zone project. Uh, Worked out really well. I think it was a great experience. One of the key learnings I had from that was understanding people's emotions more than just getting tasks done by them. Uh, as basic as it sounds, when you're working so many hours with same people, you need to understand them. The better you understand them, the better you understand them emotionally, the more impact you have on them. Because you're going to be spending more time with these people than you're spending at your own house. This is before the COVID situation, but the idea is the more you understand them, you know that if they're getting towards a burnout, giving them some time off, having a finer balance into the task they're doing, keeping a good balance and keeping good understanding with the team, I think is the most critical aspect of it.
And in terms of project, any interesting project which you had the opportunity to work on, you don't have to name the company name or any important data around it, but just an overview of how the project was, just to make people understand.
So I've during my time, even though I've spent quite a lot of time here, I haven't been on too many projects because I have been focused on very specific projects. Um,
Mhm.
Worked with two of the biggest free zones in the region. Uh, I worked with the ministry in Saudi. I'm currently working with the biggest logistics company in UAE, and the scale of these projects is huge. I cannot emphasize enough on how big these projects are getting. During my time, I have only been part of bigger and bigger projects, and each one of them has been learning on its own. It's been crazy hours every day. Uh, but the idea of going live with the project is crazy. And currently, I just went live with the project last week. Uh, it's exceptional the amount of energy you get by going live on a project that you worked on over the last few months, and seeing the product go live and being used by so many people and actually affecting them in such a positive aspect really gets you buzzing, and your entire hard work over the last few months shows very clearly. um, I think that's a great feeling.
Absolutely, I agree with you in that. And if you have to give one advice to anyone who's aspiring to be a consultant, what would that advice be?
Start doing cases start doing cases as early as you can. Pick out the best ones online, and looking at them. Have an aptitude for solving problems. Have an aptitude for high energy work. Uh, you're always going to be on your feet. You're always going to be wearing suits. Uh, it's not going to be easy, but getting that going is really critical. Knowing the latest in the market, knowing the latest technologies in the market, uh, knowing what's going on in the industry you're an expert in, all these are really critical for you to get into consulting into a specific category and then grow in it. Uh, if it's not as difficult as you think it is, you can network with the right people, you can follow the right companies, and you know you know what's going on. It's very easy if you get the hang of it and are in the right direction. I think consulting is a great career. uh, I have learned a lot in these 3.5 years, and anyone who's looking at really really growing, and getting the hang of just being an external consultant, uh, definitely try it out for a few years. Grill yourself, work yourself, and you'll be glad you did it.
That's great to know. Perfect. I think that would be everything. Thank you for taking all your time and being part of this video, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Nikhil. Really means a lot. I hope I've provided enough insights. Um, Required, please reach out to me for any more clarification.